In lesson 1.3, we're going to talk about budgeting and spending. And by the end of this lesson, you should know the importance of setting a budget. You should understand major types of expenses that go into your budget. And you should hopefully learn some systems that you can use to manage your budget. First of all, do you know how much you spend monthly? I mean, do you have a really good idea of it? Are you careful with your money or do you burn right through it? The problem is a lot of people do burn right through it. They don't have any idea how much they spend, and by the end of each pay period, they're already broke. In a previous lesson, we talked about 75 or 76% of Americans live from paycheck to paycheck. That's largely because they can't budget. So the solution to this is build a budget, develop it, work it, and you've got to plan for it. It's not easy. It does take work. You've got to do some planning. And the hardest part is it takes discipline, and you've got to make some decisions about what's important to you. So we're going to work with you on that, because if you don't develop a budget, and a lot of Americans don't, then what happens is you have to work harder, and actually you end up with less money if you can't budget. So managing your money is what this course is all about. Developing a budget is a crucial skill that's not easy, but it is doable, and it will be one of the most valuable skills you can develop. First of all, budgeting basics. If you were a person right out of high school and you went into the workforce, or you're right out of college at your first job, you've got to understand that your budgeting doesn't start with your gross income. It starts with your take-home income, your net pay. So suppose you made about 20 bucks an hour and they took out 15% for taxes typically. In a given month, you'd probably make around $3,000 take-home pay or net pay. Now, right off the top, right, you've got to subtract out any debts you've got to pay. Most of us are going to have to pay rent when we're right out of college or right into the workforce from high school. Rent is hopefully about a third of your net pay, all right? Shouldn't be too much more than that. You may have student loans, or you might have some other loans that you took out that you got to pay. So first of all, you got to subtract out the debts, and that's what budgeting often is. It's starting with a bigger number, and it's basically an exercise in subtraction and seeing what you got left. All right, so what else happens? You got to pay car payments. Most of us do, unless you own the car outright. Everybody's got to have car insurance in California. It's illegal not to. And how much gas do you burn? Do you have actual numbers and know how much you spend on these things? But pretty soon you start subtracting all these things from your net pay, and you've got to make sure you don't overspend, or you could have a negative number at the end of the day here. One of the hardest things for people to calculate here is knowing your living expenses. Do you spend 200 bucks a month on food or 400 bucks a month on food? It makes a huge difference and adds up quick. Utilities are often something people overlook when they are doing their budgets. Electricity is not free, internet's not free, water, even paying for sewer and trash service to your house is not free. So understand what your utilities are, especially if you own a house. Many apartment complexes actually cover some of the utilities, but you want to make sure you know what those are before you sign a lease. And the most important thing, I think, is prioritizing your needs and then tracking your spending. We all want some fun money. Do you spend 200 bucks a month? Do you spend 200 bucks a week on entertainment? So whatever is left at the end of all this, when I do the subtraction, right, I can see that I may have a positive balance down here at the end. Maybe I was hoping to save $1,000 a month, so I'd have 12 grand a year to play with or to work with or to invest or to save up for a new car or a down payment on a home or something. But if I'm only able to save 650 each month, then I'm behind my target. If I can cut down some of these costs, then I'll save more. If I spend way more than what I budgeted, then I'm not saving much of anything. But understanding the basics of doing a budget is very critical. Now, we're not talking about getting out a calculator and watching every single penny. Some people do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But you'll notice these numbers here are big round numbers that I've made very easy to estimate so that it's not a huge complicated process. As long as it's accurate and as long as it is ballpark of what the real numbers are, within the ballpark anyway, it's going to work for you. Notice I've rounded these off to the nearest $50, and I still have a pretty good budget if these numbers are fairly accurate. They don't have to be perfect. It's better to be generally correct than precisely wrong. And so we're not asking or not expecting everybody to watch every single penny. There's nothing wrong with that again, but if you can do good budgeting with round numbers that are fairly accurate, you'll be fine. It does not have to be an exercise with tons of paper and tons of work on a calculator or a spreadsheet. Okay, those things will help, and we'll talk about those later, but rough numbers can do a great job for you if you are realistic and accurate. All right, so some of the keys to good budgeting. Yeah, get accurate if you can, but you don't have to slice every penny and know where every penny goes. This guy's being way too accurate here, I think, but maybe that's what maybe that's how good he budgets here. You've got to make conservative estimates when you aren't sure. And what I mean by conservative is that you've got to be pessimistic. Don't build in expected good news. You actually, if you owe $300 on something, you might even estimate $350 just to make sure you're giving a pessimistic budget. It's not that we don't want to be optimistic, but people who are a little bit too optimistic just aren't realistic when they do budgets. All right. Choose a system for tracking your expenses. You've got to have a plan, and then you got to work it. Okay. If any of your plan involves a get-rich scheme here or a financial miracle down the road, it's probably not a realistic or a conservative budgeting process. All right. So first of all, we're going to give you some tools about how to understand your expenses and the different classifications for them. There's fixed expenses like a car payment or a rent. Those shouldn't change generally. If you get loans on a car or for a home, if you buy a home, I strongly recommend getting fixed rate loans so the payments don't change. If you get a variable rate loan on a car or a home, then your payments can change, and that can put a lot of uncertainty into your financial plan. Variable expenses do change. We don't always buy the same food or spend the same money on entertainment with our friends every month, but understand how much you're spending. Periodic expenses are things like taxes at the end of the year. You may owe money, you may get money back, depending on your allowances. Remember, we talked about that in lesson 1.1. This umbrella here represents insurance. Insurance is basically just protection from a financial disaster. If you own a car, you got to have car insurance. Hopefully you'll have medical insurance in case you have some physical calamity that requires expensive doctor bills. Hope you have coverage for that. And actually, most of us start out as renters early in your adult life, and so you might want to have renter's insurance as well in case something happened to your apartment or your house that you're renting and landlord's coverage didn't cover it. If these bills come up once or twice a year, they're called periodic expenses, and you may want to set money aside to make sure you allow for those. Okay, so first of all, fixed expenses are easy to estimate. They shouldn't change. Again, fixed rate loans are better than variable rate loans in most cases, and they're a lot more common. If your monthly rent is $890 a month, round it up to 900 just to keep it simple. If you got a car payment of 317, round it up to the nearest 10 or nearest 25 bucks. Again, accuracy is close enough here, and notice I'm rounding up to be conservative. That's how I'd estimate my fixed expenses. All right. Variable expenses, food and entertainment, things like this. They're not always easy to estimate because they change, but you do have control of them. So track your variable expenses for several months, then take an average. We've got water bills that change based on how much you water your landscaping, or how many friends come over and stay at your house, or how long your showers are, that type of thing. Utilities like electricity, they do vary. Even trash and cable TV, these things, I don't know if people are buying cable much these days anymore, but trash and water and electricity, they're not free, and they do vary. Understand that during certain months, you can have a spike in your usage. If it's a really, really hot month and you got the AC cranked up, well, yeah, your electricity bill is going to go up. Some of you might live in cold weather climates where you rely on natural gas for heating. Your gas bill may go up in the winter months if you're going to college, or if you decide to live in Chicago or the East Coast somewhere. Watch for these seasonal spikes because your bills are not always the same from fall to spring to winter to summer. Okay. Anyway, keep track of those and understand that you do have some control over your variable expenses, including your internet and your phone and your apps and those types of things too. This is becoming an increasing part of young people's bills. Periodic expenses like taxes and insurance. Split these things up, set money aside to prepare for them. One thing to watch out for is if your insurance is $1,200 a year, well, that's easy. I made an easy number here. Put $100 in your monthly budget to cover your insurance. On taxes, at the end of the year, if you had to write a check to the federal government because you didn't take out enough taxes, well, that's something you might change. Change your W-4 like we talked about in lesson 1.1. Set aside some money monthly, and you can do that through your W-4, or you can just set money aside and then pay the feds when you're done at the end of the year. All right. The most important thing that people fail to do, I think, is tracking your spending. You've got to have a system that tracks where your money goes. And there's a lot of methods to do this. First of all, some people just pile receipts into envelopes each month, whether it's home repairs or vacations or entertainment or groceries, whatever it was. Just put every receipt and say, oh, that's a food expense, oh, that's a car expense, oh, that's an entertainment expense. You can look at it later. One of the easiest things is with everything going electronic these days, you can track all your expenses through bank account statements. You can look at spreadsheets that you keep yourself if you have the skills and the ability to do that. There's a lot of online apps and a lot of budgeting tools that are free online. Some financial software can help with this as well. So keep in mind all those different things. We talked about the envelope method. You can just keep receipts for everything you spend money on and notice how much it adds up to at the end of the month and then make your budget. Some people even set aside cash into envelopes and they pay their bills out of the cash they've set aside into these envelopes. Kind of an old school analog system, not very high tech, but it works. People set aside 600 bucks for food and they only buy food out of the money in that envelope. All right, this system is simple and easy, no software, it's not really techy, very low tech, but it works. All right. Problem is you can lose receipts. It's paper intensive, but a lot of people have to track receipts anyway, especially if you're keeping track of them for tax purposes. You may have to add things up by hand, but again, you can do this and it's pretty easy if you take care of it once a month. Online is a great way to go because your banks are now offering tremendous amounts of detail going back typically about a year for all the expenses in your checking or savings account. So you can look at your account statement and compare your actual spending compared to your budgeted amount by just looking at things. If you run everything through a Visa card, a lot of institutions will actually group your spending into categories like clothing, food, entertainment, utilities, that type of thing. Visa, MasterCard, they're especially good at that if you have one of those. But be careful, credit cards can be very addictive. The downside is obviously you need online access. I can't always tell exactly what expenditures were just by clicking on them. If I click on this one, transfer to somebody, I should probably be able to follow that. But if I don't know exactly what the check was for, I hope I can click on it and understand exactly or see the actual check. But sometimes some of these entries, you're not sure exactly what they are. You can always call your bank and find out though. Spreadsheets require a bit of data entry, but if you have the skills, you can actually do a lot with spreadsheets and you can run a lot of different scenarios by changing numbers. So they're very flexible, they're very useful. You can forecast future scenarios with your spending. If you get a 10% raise, you can see what the future looks like with a 10% raise and how much more money you can spend or save. It does require some skills. You've got to do some data entry, but spreadsheets can be very, very powerful. It's how most budgeting is done in businesses, unless there's another software program that they're using, a commercial software program to replace a basic spreadsheet. And more there are online apps that'll help you do this budgeting thing here. So this is from Dave Ramsey. He's a financial personal finance guru, and he offers this tool here. We'll go over this later too, but you can actually enter data in and just mess with the numbers a little bit here to see if you can actually make your budget work. So usually these are free and easy to use. Right? You start off with your income up here at the top, and you put in how much money you want to save and how much money you spend on housing and all these different categories, and you scroll to the bottom and you see how much money is left over. So these give very easy results to read, and it's mobile as long as you have connectivity, right? You can get on it with your phone or a laptop or a tablet or something. You do need web access. The tools aren't always flexible because somebody else designed it and owned it, but these apps are very, very useful for putting together a budget for yourself. So, long-term goals, understand that setting a goal, even if you missed it slightly or you struggle to reach it, that's better than not setting a goal at all. People who do have goals tend to achieve a lot more. There's a lot of research on this. Getting out of debt, planning for a vacation, planning to buy a house, setting goals is one of the things that really motivates you to save money and to earn more money as well. So these are good things. So reaching your goal, understand that, as we've said throughout this lesson, you've got to have accurate estimates of the cost of the things that you spend money on. You've got to have timelines of when you want to reach your goal and calculate how much money you got to set aside every month to reach your goal in time. Okay, so later in this lesson, you're going to watch a video by Bank of America about budgeting. And if you spend $5 on a latte each day, they'll talk about that. If you got to eat a lot, even if it's McDonald's or In-N-Out, if you are into the latest fashion, got to have the coolest shoes and the latest designer jeans, understand that those things are coming out of your future. One of the best phrases I've heard describing this is that discipline is simply choosing what you want most over what you want right now. So think about that. As you look at your budgeting and spending and your long-term financial viability, think about what you want the most as opposed to what you want now. And set a budget, stick to it, track your numbers and adjust it as you can. But budgeting and spending are critical pieces of your financial future. Take them seriously.